Okay, in the past, I have made mention of how the numbers by not the book of Numbers, but how the account of how many people in various stories might not be fully accurate. Now, in general, I hold to the view that if Joseph Smith did not make a correction in the Joseph Smith translation when he was doing his translation, that we should just assume that the account is accurate. And in general, I agree with that. And I don't think there could be any error in our faith if we hold to that. But there are some interesting things that might point to the possibility that Joseph Smith did not correct all errors when he was doing the translation, that he never got to finish it completely, particularly when it comes to numbers. So there is this enrichment section in the old, this is the Institute Manual, Student Institute Manual for the Old Testament from Genesis to 2 Samuel. This is enrichment section E, starting on page 93, and I want to read a few excerpts here. Don't want to go into too much detail, but just a few things talking about numbers. It says this is section 3 in the enrichment. There is evidence that the Old Testament text is on the whole marvelously well preserved. There's also evidence from the parallel passages in Samuel, Kings, Chronicles, and especially in Ezra and Nehemiah, that numbers were particularly difficult to transmit accurately. We have instances of extra knots being added to a number so that 700 becomes 7,000. A digit can drop out so that 18 becomes 8, and an entire numeral can drop out, giving you different ranges. So that's just a summary of that section, but let's go on here. We have also section 4 of the enrichment, the confusion of words. I love this one. In the modern Hebrew Bible, all numbers are written out in full, but for a long time the text was written without vowels. The absence of vowels made it possible to confuse two words which are crucial to this problem: Aleph and Aleph. Aleph and Aleph. Without vowel points, these words look identical, LP and LP. Aleph is the ordinary word for thousand, but it can also be used in a variety of other senses, such as family or clan, or perhaps a military unit. Aleph is used for the chieftains of Edom, probably for a commander of a military thousand, and almost certainly for the professional, fully armed soldier. So we have these two things. One word that means 1,000, or military unit of 1,000, kind of like a Roman legion. Or we have the other word that means captain, chief, or professional soldier. Now, military statistics. At certain periods, warfare was conducted by two sharply distinguished types of fighting men, the Goliaths and the Davids, the professional soldiers who were fully armed, and the folk army, whose only weapons were those of the peasant shepherd. It seems clear that in a number of places the word for professional soldier has been misunderstood as meaning thousand. So, in other words, we have these two words, Aleph and Aleph. Both in ancient spelling would have been spelled just LP. And so when they refer to a captain, it is mistakenly thought to refer to 1,000. And so, for example, it says, take, for example, the attack on the little town of Gibeah in Judges chapter 20. Verse 2 says that 400,000 footmen that drew the sword assembled. If these were, in fact, 400 fully armed foot soldiers, the subsequent narrative makes excellent sense. So, if it was the word Aleph instead of the word Aleph, then it would have just been 400 soldiers. But if it is mistranslated as Aleph instead of Aleph, then it is 400,000. Now, this section goes into a lot of detail on a lot of other stories, but let's read the last paragraph on this section here. It says, along these lines, most of the numerical problems of the later history fall into place. In 1 Kings, the little Israelite army killed 100, not 100,000 foot soldiers, and the wall of Aphek killed 27, not 27,000 more. The Ethiopian invasion had 1,000, not 1,000,000 warriors. 10 were cast down from the top of the rock, and so on. So we see this this error coming in, that the professional soldiers are being turned into military units of thousands instead of just professional soldiers. Now, here's the important one here, and I think this will be the last section that I read here. This is says the size of the Israelite nation. The most interesting, most difficult, and from a historian's point of view, the most important question is the size of the Israelite population at the different stages of its history. The present texts indicate that the 70 souls of Joseph's day had risen to 2 or 3 million at the time of the Exodus, and to at least 5 million in the time of David. With regard to the latter, R. DeVoe rightly says, 2 Samuel lists 800,000 men liable for military service in Israel, and 500,000 in Judah. The lower total in 2 Samuel is still far too high. 1.3 million men of military age would imply at least 5 million inhabitants, which for Palestine would mean nearly twice as many people to the square mile as in the most thickly populated countries of modern Europe. So we get this difficulty here. Now, I do want to point out, they talk about the 70 souls of Joseph's day risen to 2. It wasn't just 70 souls, as I've mentioned many times. Those were just the ones directly descended from Jacob. There were several hundred that came down with Jacob. They were given an entire land, an entire region of Goshen was given to them. This was way more than just 70 people. But still, increasing in population as is indicated, possible but somewhat questionable. So let us read their explanation here. It says here, the solution of the problem of the Exodus numbers is a long story. Suffice it to say that there is good reason to believe that the original census in Numbers chapter 1 and chapter 26 set out the numbers of each tribe somewhat in this form. Simeon, 57 armed men, 23 hundreds or military units. This can be written as 57 LP, 2 LP 300s. Not realizing that LP in one case meant armed man, and in the other 1,000, this was tidied up to read 59,300. Notice that, 2,000, so that they read it, it's supposed to be 57 armed men, 2,300 military, or 2,300 military units, 2,300 soldiers. So we have 57 professionals, 2,300 militia. But if 57, if both LPs mean 1,000, then it's 57,000 plus 2,000 plus 300, 59,300. So when these figures, so continuing here, when these figures are carefully decoded, a remarkably clear picture of the whole military organization emerges. The total fighting force is some 18,000, which would probably mean a figure of about 72,000 for the whole migration. The figures of the Levites seem consistently to have collected an extra knot. The mystery of Plato's Atlantis has been solved by recognition of this same numerical confusion. Plato obtained from Egyptian priests what now turns out to be a detailed account of the Minoan civilization and its sudden end. But as all the figures were multiplied by a factor of 10, the area was too great to be enclosed in the Mediterranean, so he placed it in the Atlantic, and the date was put back into remote antiquity, thousands of years too early. This same tenfold multiplication factor is found in the figures of the Levites in the book of Numbers. When it is eliminated, Levi fits into the pattern as a standard-sized tribe of about 2,200 males. These figures agree remarkably well with the other indications of population in the period of the conquest of the Judges. Now, what that's all saying is that the translation, as you have 1,000, and you have armed man, and you have professional soldier. And the two words got confused with Levi saying, 200 suddenly became 2,000 because they accidentally added an extra zero to the end, basically. And he uses the example of Atlantis to show this, to illustrate how it has happened in other texts. So I'll leave that here and talk to you later.